Okay, so Scott, you had someone that reached out to you regarding a certain topic, and so I put together some information and did a little more research and all of that. So um, I have, to the best of my ability, come up with some information that may or may not help the person who asked. So so I'll read the questions, and then I'm going to go back to, this was on relapse. I will own that one of my least favorite topics when I go to 12 step is relapse, and I'll share more about that in a moment. So how often does it happen on average? What should an addict do when it happens, and what is their obligation to do? What constitutes relapse exactly? How do you overcome the accompanying shame and guilt? Do you go back to square one? So that was the premise of what I'm going to share today. So I want to start, kind of with the opposite of, what is recovery? And I have a friend who's a really good therapist. Like, I really, really respect him. And he flat out shared that he doesn't let his clients say that they're even sober. So I look at abstinence as just not doing the problematic behaviors. Those are the things we weren't supposed to be doing in the first place. So, anyway, sobriety is kind of the next phase where you're kind of, starting to get a foundation, and I use 2 to 5 years for recovery. There are people that use 3 to 5 years for recovery, but I'm going like, I really do believe that if you can get, a solid foundation of recovery, you can shorten that time frame. We'll talk more, but he does not let his clients use anything but abstinence for the first 90 days. So they can't count their sobriety until day 91, which I said that's harsh because I want every little single day. But as Scott has shared, he did and I want to tie this in. Scott did a really good webinar on the cycle of addiction. And there's lots of people that can spin around on the cycle of addiction. And, so if you have not seen that webinar, Scott mentioned we have a whole YouTube channel, and that's a really helpful topic, whether you're the person that's struggling with addiction or the partner, just to understand what is this. So there are lots of people that, don't act out every day. They can go 90 days but they just still are spinning around. So the cycle of addiction is kind of like a bicycle wheel. How fast is it going around? That's the only difference. So interrupting that cycle, is the start of abstinence. So addiction is a chronic condition. So, I often use an analogy, and it's not a great analogy, but it's an analogy. It's like diabetes. If you have diabetes, you will probably always have diabetes. And, if you eat right, you take care of yourself, you can live without the negative consequences of diabetes. If you choose to, eat chocolate cake and not exercise, and you do all the other things, drink sodas, whatever, you will probably live with negative consequences of diabetes. So this is kind of similar in that we never get cured. We're never, I hear people that I want to get over this, and we don't. We have a daily reprieve based on what we're doing. We can learn to identify triggers. We can avoid risky situations and manage the disease like diabetes. So that's kind of, oh yeah. So he put it in the cycle of addiction. So he found it. Yeah. We have lots of things. And so, yes, reach out, type in the questions, but otherwise, Tami, Tami at Seeking Integrity, I will, point you to different directions, but there's a wealth of information in that. So that's kind of, where I'm going to start with, if that's recovery. And I really do believe that recovery is we integrate this into all areas of our life. We are not, well, I'm doing my recovery work and then I'm doing the rest of life. Real recovery is I'm actually doing this and I'm thinking of recovery. I'm stopping mid-sentence, sorry. My brain is going. So Scott and a good friend of ours, Kristen Snowden, wrote Life Anonymous. And it's just good living. Even if you're not an addict, this is good living. We didn't have that. If we're addicts, we didn't have that. Our brain thinks differently, and we can learn to live in a recovery path. And it's so worth it but lots of us are hanging on, like we're hanging on to, well, I shouldn't have to give up this, and and we miss out on the good stuff. So I want to, recovery is so worth the effort. And yeah, some people struggle with slips and relapse, and I want to talk about that a bit. Yes, thank you. Interrupt me if you're putting anything but resources. so, uh, so, if addiction is really a brain disease, a thinking distortion, I pulled this up from ASAM. That's the American Society of Addiction Medicine. And this is from a whole bunch of doctors who actually do this work. Addiction is a treatable chronic medical disease involving complex interactions among brain circuits, genetics, the environment, and an individual's life experiences. People with addiction use substances or engage in behaviors, some both, that have compulsive and often continue despite harmful consequences. That's called the insanity of the disease. Prevention efforts and treatment approaches for addiction are generally as successful for those of other chronic diseases. So what is a relapse, and what is it different from a slip? So, we talk about, slips, and to me, and again, a slip is, if I do something, if I do one of my problematic behaviors and I go, Scott, I need to tell you, I did this, and I've reached out to my sponsor. I'm meeting with my sponsor. I'm having coffee with my sponsor. We're going to talk about this, or I've reached out to my therapist, and here's my plan for, how I'm going to prevent doing that again. That I'm owning, I'm taking responsibility. I'm learning from that particular, situation. A relapse is, Scott's looking at my phone and goes, what the heck? Why were you reaching out to these people? And whatever, there's discovery. And it was 2 weeks ago, and I didn't bother to tell Scott, because you know what, Scott, I don't want to, oh God, I don't want to hurt Scott's feelings. He's going to be so upset. I'm so taking care of Scott. I'm taking care of me, So a relapse is, I'm not owning what I'm doing. I will probably be caught rather than sharing, or if I share, I minimize, diminish the severity of it. I'm very dismissive. I'm blame shifting. All of the negative things that addiction brings with it. So to me, that is, a relapse is very different from a slip. Okay, so why relapses happen. And again, I did, some research because I have my opinions, but I looked up some stuff. So denial, I call this the fantastical thinking. One more time won't hurt. And if somebody doesn't know, they don't, it doesn't, if Scott doesn't know, like, listen, it's not going to hurt him. Stress, you name it, job, family, life is stressful. Justification, emotional pain. We want to escape this, even if it's temporary. And that we again lack life skills to be able to do life on life's terms, which comes with the emotional stuff, the good stuff and the bad stuff. So for those who have been doing recovery work, they stop doing the work, thinking that they are over it. I can't tell you how many people I was traveling, and I didn't get to go to my favorite meeting in Seattle. And so I had to find a new meeting, but I found a new meeting, and I was like, well, this is, I will call it a God thing, because I ended up at a meeting that was exactly what I needed to do. And I wouldn't have gone if I had gone to the other meeting. So I'm sitting there listening, and I'm hearing, and it was why I chose to do this topic that Scott presented, because people are sharing, and they're sharing their journey, hard fought, but some of them, it was like, couldn't get more than 30 days, and they do the same thing. But some of them had some periods of time, and then they would, go back out. And it, to me, it's always, if we are doing the work that we need to do. I don't know anybody who actually is doing the recovery work that goes out and relapses. They have the ability to think it through, for the 3 seconds, and pick up the phone and call somebody, anybody, to get out of that mode, So that's the insanity of the disease. I was literally sitting in that meeting thinking, I hate this disease. I do. I hate it. And I got it. but it's also so insane that we will continue to do things that hurt ourselves and other people. And it's like, that's what we know to do. And so for betrayed partners, and I often say this, you will never understand because your brain does not think like that. You would never do those things. So you having any understanding is just, you know, crazy thinking. So you got crazy thinking, and what do? Uh, so one of the things I was, does a relapse happen quickly? And I do not believe it does. And that was backed up by the information that I was, researching. No, we fall back on old behaviors. We skip recovery work, qualified therapist, group meetings, working with our sponsor or other accountability people. Notice I hear say accountability people. I get lots of people who reach out that are like, I love your podcast. Great. Love podcasts, love videos. Great. And there's no accountability in that. So if there's no accountability, guess what? That means my crazy thinking is telling me what to do. I was in a meeting at one of my home groups, and somebody was sharing that they were their sponsor. They were their own sponsor. They said really bad choice, and I was like, yeah, look, our best thinking got us into this situation. So we need somebody else's voice to get us out. A change in attitude or thinking, the loses the desire to be in recovery. It's too hard. I'm cured. I deserve to get back to my real life, whatever it is. But I really do not believe that a relapse happened in the moment that it happens. It could be, 2 days ago, 2 weeks ago, something was going on where we started giving ourselves permission to drift away rather than lean back into recovery. So how to prevent a relapse? Stay connected with healthy people. Notice I say healthy people. That means people that are trying to do this work. Other good social, people. Don't go hang out with the same people that you acted out with, or in places that were, toxic. Learn to recognize triggers. It is data. This is not a reason to relapse. Like if I'm feeling triggered about anything, it is my opportunity to look at what's going on with me and what do I need to do to move into a space where I'm not feeling dysregulated, but I'm able to regulate and make, intelligent, executive brain choices. Know your relapse prevention plan. I bet there's lots of people that start out, have a relapse prevention plan, and it gets buried under, the books on the nightstand, or, goes through the laundry, whatever it is. Keep that handy and keep refreshing that so that that we're paying attention. Like, oh, I have a little struggle here. What do I need to boost that? If there is a relapse, I believe in doing autopsies on that, like look at what happened, not just go, oh, I won't do that again. Start doing the autopsy of like, oh, when my work colleague said that, 3 days ago, I was really upset and I didn't, say anything to them. And therefore I started going down the hill. Again, go look at the cycle of addiction, because Scott, once you're going down the hill, it's hard to get back up. So when did you give yourself permission to act out? What was going on for you in the moment? Strong emotional feelings, again, good or bad. I deserved it because I got a raise at work or whatever. Or, oh my gosh, I feel so, dismissed or slighted. Or boredom. Boredom is a really big factor for addicts. We seek intensity rather than, calm. What could we do differently next time? Like replaying a film, if you go back to that spot in the film, and go, okay, the character is going to choose that. We already know how the movie played out, but is there something else they could have done? You are the actor, but if you're looking at it kind of, so rather than falling into shame, it's like you're taking a look at this, as an observer and going, what could I do differently next time? Write it down, talk to your sponsor, talk to your accountability people about that. So one of the questions was, do you have to start all over? And I kind of go, it depends. If you're still in I haven't really accepted, step one of the 12 steps is, I've accepted that my life is unmanageable. And if you're still spinning around, you're probably struggling a little bit with that. Now, if you've been around, I know lots of people that have been, kind of around the work for a while. You have some, you have some information, but what do you need to do, to to do things differently, you know, so that you can, I do think I'm kind of hardcore. No, I'm really hardcore. So like if I relapse, like my count starts over, that's integrity for me. If I relapsed, which I don't want to, and I'm going to choose not to today, um, I would have to start all over. That would be, that's how I do my recovery. I'm either in or I'm out. There's no in between. Okay. So shame and guilt, you know, um, I've referred to this a lot. Dr. Eddie did a webinar in September and he quoted Dr. Gabor Mate, whatever happened, you can't make unhappen. And that's true with a relapse too. If you've relapsed, you can't make that unhappen. And just going to the shame place is kind of self-centered. Oh, poor me, I did this, I'm so terrible, whatever, rather than going, wow, that was hard on me and I don't want to do it again, and what do I need to do to do that? So getting down in a shame spiral doesn't help, you, and it doesn't change anything else. So taking responsibility and learning from the experience so it's not a vicious cycle. And I've shared this before, Scott and I did in February, a webinar on the 12 steps, but steps 4 through 9 of the 12-step program really do help. Those are the, cleaning house, those are our ability to not have to hang on to, the shame and the guilt and everything else. And we get a lot of awarenesses about things. So that's my topic on relapse, and how I hope people can choose to. I mean, a lot of it is, in this moment, I have a choice. And if you give yourself, you know, 15 seconds to think it through, like, oh, I can go do this, or I can phone a friend, I can go listen to the podcasts are 24/7. I have so many people that go, every time I think of relapsing, I listen to a podcast. Great. That's a way better choice than listening to a podcast after they've relapsed. So there are choices. It's hard to get to that point, but once you're committed to this, you can choose, and it's just really doing the work. So okay, Scott, thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah, I like that you differentiate between slip and relapse. The way I always do it is a slip is a brief return to active addiction that I come clean about with everybody right away. I get back on the horse of recovery. That's a slip. I'm still going to restart my day count. A relapse is a slip that I keep secret. And if I keep it secret, it's going to continue. I'm just back in active addiction, full blown. So that, to me, that's the difference between a slip and a relapse. But a slip is still a form of relapse. It's just a short one, and hopefully we learn from it. You mentioned the relapse autopsy, and I dug up the what I use with people. As you look at your most recent slip or relapse, hopefully just a slip, we ask ourselves, what is the behavior I looked at? Well, I looked at porn, and before that, I was looking at not porn, and and then I masturbated. I acted out. It's red circle for me. It's bottom line behavior. The next question is, what did you tell yourself to minimize or rationalize or justify it right before you did it? So your denial, which you mentioned. Denial always boils down to two words. The first one starts with F and the second one is it. But usually it's, well, nobody has to know, and this is the last time, and it won't be as bad as before. All those justifications, rationalizations that happen right before we start clicking, or whatever it is we do. And by the way, in an autopsy, we're working from the outside in. It's the same way you do an actual autopsy. You work from the outside in. If you've ever been to one, I don't recommend it, but they work from the. I went to one when I was like 10. My father was a prosecutor and a judge, and his best friend was the head of homicide. And his best friend came over and said, "Hey, we're going to go to something." And I was like, "Can we go?" Yeah, come on. Don't ever take a 10-year-old to an autopsy. It is gross. And the smell. Never mind. Digression, TMI. So So we start out, what did I do? Then we look at our denial, and then we look at the thoughts before that, the thoughts and beliefs we were having that caused us to want to escape. You know, why did I want to numb out? Because I mean, I'll speak for myself as a sex and porn addict. If I'm looking at porn, it's to numb out. It's got nothing to do with sex. I'm not horny. I'm having a bad day. Um, what was spinning in my head? You know, the thoughts and the feelings. You know, what was my emotional state? And when I can figure out what thoughts and feelings I was having, then I can link it to an external event that may have happened a week ago or a month ago. My boss looked at me funny, or Jamie yelled at me, or whatever. Um, I'll carry that around for a while. I'll carry that around for a while. And then I start to have thoughts and feelings. And then I want to numb out. And then I make it okay in my head to numb out. And then I numb out. Um, so we kind of work from the outside in to figure out what the initial triggering event was. And you talked about that. And then I want people to answer, um, where could you have intervened? This is the learning part of a slip or a relapse. And with sex and porn addiction, sadly, slips and relapse happen. Slips happen quite a bit. We're not giving you permission here to slip, but they do happen. Other addictions as well. They're not the end of the world if we learn from them. And what we need to learn is what happened and how can I intervene next time? What steps could I have taken this time? And the next time something happens at work, or Tami yells at me, or whatever it is that triggered me 3 weeks ago, how can I handle it better this time? And part of recovery is, one of the recovery sayings that Tami and I both use sometimes is progress, not perfection. I use it a lot. And this is progress. I made a mistake, but if I learn from it and don't make it again, that's progress. It's not perfection, but it's progress, and I'll take progress. So that, to me, that's the important takeaway from a slip or a relapse is, what do I learn from it so that I don't do it again? Because, do you start over? Well, you start your day count over, but whatever you've learned up to that point, you still know that, and you can still apply it. Now sometimes after a long relapse, people do need to go back to the beginning. They need, just start over. Take the SA 101 work group again. Go back to step one, all of that stuff. So yeah, that's, any thoughts on that, Tami?
Well, yeah, and I like, if it's a chronic cycle of relapse, I'm like, yes, start at the beginning. Like, just,
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many first step meetings I've been into. I don't even know, hundreds, maybe 1,000, doesn't matter. I can always learn from them. So it's never like, oh, I don't need that. I'm so far beyond that. No, I can always, go, if nothing else. I am so glad I'm in recovery and not starting at that point.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter. Like,
I love going to a first step meeting because it reminds me of, like, oh yeah, that's why I keep coming to meetings, because I don't
yeah,
want to be in that emotional pain. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
And I think you know what you talked about, progress, not perfection. I know partners get really like, but I'm gonna tell you, like, if your addict comes to you and goes, hey, I had a slip, and here I've called my sponsor, I've called my therapist, I'm going to an extra meeting, whatever it is, like, that will feel different, and that will feel like progress.
yeah.
If you're a partner that is like bound and determined that your addict is never, ever, ever, ever going to act out again, that is, I have gratefully not relapsed. It is why, like, when people go, oh, relapse is just part of it, it doesn't always have to be. I know other people who, haven't had to do that. And there's no judgment. I just value the people that keep, coming back until they, really get
Yeah.
it. Everybody's journey is different, but, if I still don't tell anybody I will never, ever, ever act out again. I'm telling you today, I take care of myself. I do what I need to do. that's my progress. And like Scott said, I'm still on this journey. I like myself more now than 2 years ago, and 2 years from now, it will be the same. If I keep doing the work, that's the key. If I keep
Yeah,
doing the work, because I'm either in active addiction or active recovery, and I keep choosing active recovery because it's so
yeah,
much better. One of the sayings in 12 step is the easier, softer way. And I'll tell you, once you get into recovery, the easier, softer way is stay on the path.
yeah,
It just is. I don't have to clean up a whole bunch of messes on a daily basis, that I created. I mean, like it was chaos, you know, I always think of like Pigpen from
yeah,
Charlie Brown and the Cloud of Chaos. I was chaos, and I don't have to do that. I don't have to make a mess of things, and I don't have to do a lot of amends. I make amends when I need to. This is progress, but I'm sure not perfect on any stretch of the imagination. So we've got some questions. Make
um,
sure you define for people the difference between sobriety and recovery. I feel it's very important for people to know that just because you're sober doesn't mean you're in recovery, but recovery is not possible until you get sober first. Yes. And yeah, and I kind of said that, and I kind of skipped through that, but yeah, like you can't go from abstinence to recovery. Like you have to learn, and that's what sobriety is. And it's like you're starting to engage things, but real recovery is like I live the 12 steps, so that's
yeah,
very incorporated. But you're right. If you're constantly just abstinent, you're still not a very nice person. You haven't learned any life tools. We in with AA, they call it a dry drunk. Those people are not drinking, and some of them are the meanest people on the planet because they're not drinking, which was what they used to as a go-to, and they're not in recovery. So like that, it really sucks for everybody. So
yeah. I always think of addiction as being a symptom
yes.
of flawed thinking and flawed beliefs and flawed, you know, I get sober so I can see the flaws and then I can work on the flaws. That's the recovery part. So yeah, well put.
So the next one is, so I'm going to go to the last one. This was about legal issues. That's October 30th. So join again. I think that was posted out there, but the legal issues one is October 30th. So, but I think there was a card that went out about that.
Yeah,
Oh,
legal issues webinar.
yeah, the I think we Tonglen might have done it, but yeah, so that will be at the end of the month. So join again. Okay, my husband is in active addiction. Therefore we are separated for nearly a year. I heard him tell a spiritual leader that he is not fighting the addiction at the moment at all. The answer from the leader was, "It's not your fault. You did not ask for this." Oh gosh, I feel like this is a lie that he has had times of sobriety so he can do it. What do is he is choosing not to. What should a spiritual leader say when he knows what the addict is doing to his wife and three young kids?
Um, Look, I mean, the things that happened to me in my early life um, that made it difficult for me to trust other people and easier for me to turn to a substance or a behavior to numb out when I was having feelings, not my fault. But nobody ever held a gun to my head and said, Scott, get drunk, get high, and go have sex with strangers in a bush. That is my choice. That is my fault. Um, the pain that I carry around, not really my fault. I didn't ask for it, but being an addict, making addict choices is my fault. Um, I learned that from the 12 steps more than anything else. I got to step four, which is a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. And, there are various ways to do that. I won't dig into them here, but you can read Life Anonymous, the book Tami mentioned earlier. But I did step four. I did a searching and fearless moral inventory. And for the first time in my life, I stopped blaming you, the collective you, for my problems. I realized pardon my language, but the asshole in my life was me, not you. Um, your husband's not there yet. I hope he finds some recovery. spiritual leaders are not addiction counselors. They are not trained to deal with this. And they're certainly not CSATs, certified sex addiction therapists. Um, it's a great place to start, but maybe you want to educate this spiritual leader, get him a book on sex addiction, say, hey, why don't you read this before you start counseling people about it? I don't know. I mean, Tammy, thoughts?
Oh, I have lots of thoughts. Yeah. So I get lots of people looking for therapy. Well, I've been through 4 therapists and or this is a better example. My husband really likes his therapist, and he's in active addiction. Like let's switch it from spiritual leader to the therapist. And I was like, that he likes his therapist because his therapist is going, oh, poor guy and all of this, and there's no accountability. Addiction recovery is very different than other conditions in mental health. And you have someone who's choosing someone who's going to go, oh, poor guy. Oh, poor guy. You didn't ask for this. I referenced, Dr. Eddie's in September that Gabor Mate said, you can't make what happened unhappen. You can't, so he's choosing to go, oh, I feel so sorry for myself. I'm going to flip it. What are your healthy boundaries for you? What do you have set for you and for those 3 kiddos? So you can't change him, but you having boundaries about this, I can't trust you. You're not in recovery, and therefore, whether it's he's moving to a different bedroom, he's moving out of the house, therapeutic separation. There's a betrayed partner work group starting next week, and that particular group, they talk about healthy boundaries, and that may be a very useful place for you to start with. But he's going to do the spiritual leader probably won't care, because that'll just go, oh, now your wife is bugging me on this, and oh, you poor guy, I can understand that. Like I hear this all the time. It's the, oh, blame shifting to partners. So I would encourage you, healthy boundaries for you: physical, financial, emotional, spiritual. What do you need to do to take care of you and the kiddos? Because clearly he's not, and yeah, addiction is selfish and self-centered. And lots of people use my husband's a narcissist. All addicts have narcissistic traits. There are some, I'm sure, that have narcissistic personality disorder. It's rare, but the traits are for sure there. So to me, this is, you got no control over him. What do you need to do to shore up your boundaries for you? And we've done webinars on that, and Debbie McCrae does great ones on that. So, and we've got an Empowered Women's Retreat coming up in January now. So that we talk a lot about internal boundaries and external boundaries. And one more thing, we're working on having a work group about boundaries, because partners really struggle with what is a boundary. It's not punishment, it's not control. And so how do you set those? And they're individualized, other than, physical violence should never, that should be on everybody's list. But this is painful. And, I have this vision of you and the 3 kiddos and him going, like, yeah, well, all this stuff happened to me, and so I'm going to focus on me, but not focus on healing so that he can really be part of the family. So the next question, can we have a session on harm reduction for sex porn addiction? How does this work? Can a sponsor help with it? I am out on that one. I don't do harm reduction at all. I don't believe in it.
Yeah, let me take this one. Can we have a session on harm reduction for sex porn addiction? No, we cannot. How does it work? It doesn't. Can a sponsor help with it? No, it doesn't work. Okay. That said, sex addiction sobriety is not the same thing as like Alcoholics Anonymous, where it's abstinence, period, or Narcotics Anonymous, no drugs, period, unless they're prescribed by your physician and taken as prescribed. Total abstinence is not what we're looking for in sex addiction recovery. The way we define sex addiction sobriety is the same way we define health with an eating disorder. We eliminate the behaviors that are problematic and that are causing us problems, and we engage in healthy life-affirming behaviors. So someone with an eating disorder, there's no more binging and purging. It's about eating healthy meals 3 times a day. And it doesn't mean you never get to have ice cream again. You just get a scoop, not a gallon and a half. Sex addiction is
Darn.
sex addiction is the same way. We eliminate the problem behaviors and we work on developing a healthy, life affirming sexual self and sexual life moving forward. So if you want to call that harm reduction, fine, call it harm reduction, but we are not going to call it harm reduction. Harm reduction is a nightmare. They try that with heroin addicts. They give them methadone, which is a different opiate. They're still getting high. I mean, come on. That's not sobriety. Your life isn't getting better. Um, Harm reduction is what we call a half measure. um, the easier, softer way, no. Sorry. I hate to be so blunt, but Tami was blunt too. We're not doing harm reduction.
No,
Forget it.
no, no.
But
Well, yeah,
come to my sex addiction work group or my porn addiction work group, whichever your issue is. They're coming up fairly soon, both of them, and we'll talk about what sobriety looks like and how it can work for you. Because we don't want you to become a celibate monk. We just want you to have a healthy, life affirming sex life. Um, so
yeah.
yeah.
Well, and uh, our treatment program, we look at things holistically. So, Scott mentioned eating disorders. We've had guys that have come to our program who have a co-occurring eating disorder or substances or gaming or gambling, and if you're hanging on to that, smoking and vaping, if you're hanging on to something, you're still keeping that dopamine going. Dr. David Fawcett, talks about that a lot. It's like, you're still keeping this going. You're never going to be, a part of 12 steps. We talk about happy, joyous, and free. You won't ever be really in recovery if you're still doing all of this other stuff. We have guys that come to our residential program who've been sober from substances for years, and they've hung on to this, and it's highly problematic, and they're finally going, wait a minute, this is a problem too. But they're like, I've been able to stay sober from substances. Well, I was like, yeah, but you've been using this as your numbing out mechanism. So yeah, it's a lot easier to not drink or drug when you're still doing all of this other stuff. So we really, true recovery is so worth it. And you talked about, the heroin. Like, I was talking about somebody, or somebody said something about somebody who'd been on the methadone or whatever for 10 years, and I'm like, well, it's so great you didn't use heroin, but you've been using this for 10 years, and how is that really helping? So yeah. Thank you for yeah, we're a little hardcore. Any thoughts about the place of friends and family and spiritual leaders? Where's the line between being supportive and compassionate and empathy and enabling bad behavior? Are they complicit in the actions of enacting out behaviors? Any thoughts on the place of family and friends and spiritual? Where's the line between? I,
I'm going to suggest first and foremost getting a copy of Dr. Rob Weiss's book, Prodependence. Prodependence. Don't read about codependence, read about prodependence. It talks about caring for how loved ones can interact with and care for addicts. And it's a brilliant book. Um, the general advice is don't do for the addict what the addict should be doing for themselves. Um, don't stop loving the addict because they're an addict, but don't facilitate their addiction. Set some healthy boundaries, take care, make sure they know you love them, but you're not going to support their addiction. Tami can add to that, I'm sure.
well, yeah, and from that standpoint, and you are not responsible for their recovery program either. So here's an example. I went to residential treatment, and when I came back, I moved in with my parents, and it was a whole journey. But and they were like, "Wow, what do we need to do?" And I was like, "This is my journey. Like, I know you love me, and this is your house, your life. You don't have to change everything, around me. I'm either going to do the recovery thing or I'm not, and but it was my responsibility to, get myself to meetings, get a sponsor, do all of those things. Now I will say, as part of my journey, I lost my driver's license. So I did get rides every now and then, but I also found them from other recovery people, so it was not, when my parents dragged me to meetings, I also walked, so like, it really is, you can ask, what would be helpful. And then think about, is this a healthy boundary for me as a friend or family member? Is it going to support their recovery? You can't do recovery for them. And we have lots of people that are like, well, no, you can't bubble wrap them. You can't protect them. We have to learn to do this stuff for ourselves. So, um, God bless everyone. First and foremost, I'm a recovering addict. I'm 26. I've been sober for 21 days today. My question is, if I truly work on myself every day with me and my girlfriend holding myself accountable, is it possible that I won't have a slip or relapse ever again? I don't want to sound delusional, but I want to have hopes of not going backwards. Here's when I was in treatment, I just mentioned that, like I got into the always and forevers and all that kind of stuff. Like Skip, I told you, I'm not going to tell you that, 10 years from now, I won't act out. But for today, that's what we've got. So this is for today, do the work, and then you'll learn. And then tomorrow is another day. And then just for today, I'm going to do this work. So you are in the, very early. I shared that my friend said the first 90 days is abstinence. So you have not acted out for 21 days. Fantastic. So what are you doing today? And remember, my girlfriend, your girlfriend is not your accountability partner. So make sure that if you haven't joined, Scott's online work group, Sex Addiction 101 or Porn Addiction 101, great. Join that. I put the link in the chat. We have drop-in groups, and we've got a list of 12-step. I mentioned February 7th, the YouTube is on Scott and I talking about 12-step. So the more accountability you have, and your girlfriend is not your accountability partner, she's got her own work to do, to support her healing, then you can, one day at a time, be on a recovery path. And you know what? The days add up. And then you start getting chips for those things, and that's all good. And, but it's really about living differently. So, Scott?
I know plenty of people who went to a 12-step meeting and they've been sober ever since. Not my not my personal story. I wish it was. Um, but if you ask them how they did it, they will say exactly what Tami said, one day at a time. I woke up on Monday and I said, I'm not going to drink, use, or act out today. They woke up on Tuesday and and they did the work. They went to 12-step meetings. They got a therapist. They went to, they did all the work. And that's how you do it. And I will, I love that your girlfriend is being very supportive. That is awesome. However, your girlfriend cannot keep you sober. You need other people. Tami's 100% on that.
And speaking of other people, is it possible to be in recovery without 12 steps, but being spiritual religious practices? You need other people. So if you are in other groups, 12 step is like there's research, and the 12 step is the most effective means of staying in recovery. So you can find, I will own, I've never been to a Celebrate Recovery, but it is more of a Christian based recovery program. Smart Recovery is different than 12 step too. So I don't know. I know 12 step. It saved my bacon. So I'm gonna keep doing what has worked for decades for me. So but like I mentioned earlier, just listening to podcasts, I do my meditations
Right.
every day. That would not be enough for me, even at this point. I want to be happy, joyous, and free. I want to live, on the beam. And so, at some point, I would go listen to our webinar on 12 step, because there's a whole bunch of myths about 12 step that are myths and misperceptions. So I would wonder why you would be resistant to 12 step and giving it a try when it is the most effective means of getting, for being consistently in recovery. I know for sure that our recovery program, our residential program gives a solid foundation to get jump started, and then the other things like the work groups, etc. But if you need a tribe of people that are also doing this work in order, because a non-addict they don't understand. So you need other people who are on this journey to support you and to be a support for. So that would be my take on that.
Nothing to
Thoughts?
add.
Okay.
Nothing to add to that.
Okay. Are there different levels of addiction? My spouse met a new therapist who said that because he's been sober for a month, that his level of addiction was medium. Huh. That's fascinating. Discovery was a month ago, but he's been sexting with other women since before we got together 8 years ago. Let me guess.
Do you ever get medium pregnant?
Oh, there's a good analogy. I was thinking, let me guess. I bet this is not
You
a
either
brain
are or you aren't.
issues. Yeah. So, yeah. So we talk about having different bottoms, for the,
Right.
like I wasn't a Skid Row drunk, but you know, I had a, I know for sure in the core of my being that I'm an addict, so we have a little quiz on our website, and where people score on that is useful information. It's not like for the people that come in, but again, we have people that come to our residential treatment program who have been not acted out from substances for years, but are still struggling with this stuff. Again, the first 90 days, like we just call that abstinence. So you're not doing that. So this feels like he went to a therapist that has no clue about this specific addiction, maybe not even really about addiction. Most therapists are not really trained in addiction. They'll have like one little, session on it. But they aren't trained. So a CSAT, certified sex addiction therapist, is trained and can give, your person, oh, Scott, you left, can give your person an assessment that would really help identify. But he's been sexting with other women for 8 years, probably longer. There's probably more to it. These issues are from before usually age 10. As Scott shared earlier, the acting out is a symptom. But yeah, I would not go with this person as a medium. It sounds like a size of shirt. So I'm sorry, but like that just sounds like a bunch of hooey. I relapsed chemsex publicly in front of in-laws after secretly acting out for 6 months. I was sober for a year, but life stresses took over, a newborn. I have fear. What if it happens again in front of my children? I don't want to lose them. How do I use this fear in a positive way? All of the things that we talked about at the top of this are, you know, what I don't hear is, I'm meeting with my qualified therapist. I'm joining the chemsex drop-in groups on Tuesday nights on our, fear will not keep you sober because the fear will diminish. Like you're in a crisis right now. So it's one day at a time doing the work. You will keep acting out. I'm sorry, we're addicts. You will keep acting out unless and until you do what you need to do in order to, not do that. So, and yes, unfortunately, the birth of a child, and I'm sorry, partners, I know it's horrible, but is often, a trigger for an addict to do it. But you have choices. You had choices and you've been lying. So, we have a residential treatment program for you. You want to get a solid foundation of healing. You want to get, a plan. We can help. TAMI at seekingintegrity.com. And I can give you more information. Okay.
Sorry about that. We had
No, it's okay.
with the house.
I have a relapse over 4 months ago. I did Willow Tree relapse autopsy that consisted of some 50 pages of reflection. I did a summary for my wife at her request, and it really was not accepted. She said this was not the end of our discussion and that she has more questions. I asked multiple times to discuss her questions, and she didn't give me a date to do that. Now, 4 months later, we finally met to answer her questions, and it ended with her having more questions. How can I put this behind us? So what I hear is you guys are doing this on your own. So this, you know, I do support sessions. Scott does too. And I met with a partner. This was a while back, and she was getting ready for disclosure, and she had 150 questions, and we winnowed it down to 3 because there was 3 real questions. But yes, if it's questions, there's always going to be more questions. So at some point, your partner is looking for safety, and you guys are trying to do it DIY, and so and if it's the why, If it's ultimately the why question, perhaps the answer is because I wasn't doing what I needed to do. And it's more about what am I willing to do? What am I choosing to do now to make sure that doesn't happen again? So, but thoughts, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, this needs to be done. This kind of discussion needs to happen with the couples counselor. I mean, doing it on your own doesn't work. Um, Sorry, I'm still dealing with this other
Okay.
issue.
Okay,
Sorry.
it's all good. Are you saying that someone is still doing dopamine seeking behavior like vaping can't be in active recovery for sex addiction, or is it related to specific addiction? For example, if you quit cigarettes but use a vape instead. Okay, so Dr. David, and he'll be on later this month, but he talks about this and smoking and vaping. It's like, well, I'm not drinking, but I'm looking at porn. So again, like that, yeah, smoking and vaping, our treatment program, we do not permit smoking and vaping, because they do keep that dopamine going. So come on when Dr. David is on. He switched with Troy Love, so he'll be on, I think, the fourth week of the month, on the Wednesday morning series. But there's also previously recorded. If you want to be happy, joyous, and free, we have to look at all of our behaviors. Now, a little nod to the harm reduction. If you were, using heroin or sex workers, whatever, and now you're vaping, sure, there's a little harm reduction, but you're never going to have to be in real recovery. Not have to be. You're never going to get to be in real recovery because you're always going, hey, I need to go vape because I'm stressed out. You're not dealing with uncomfortable emotions. So I would invite you, everybody chooses their path. I mean, seriously, no judgment, but I want to be in real recovery where I'm showing up, with real emotions and connections, for myself and other people. So that's, but unfortunately, well, actually, the good news is lots of 12-step meetings, they used to all be like you walk out of there smelling like, an ashtray. And now, they're non-smoking meetings, and that's a really good thing. You get fumed just by
Yeah.
going. So,
There are serious neurochemical issues that happen with the brain and addiction. The reward center of the brain, it gets really messed up. This is why tolerance and escalation develop. This is why, one beer you got me drunk the first time, and then it was three, and then it was a six pack, and then it was, you know hard liquor, and then it was smoking dope, and then it was grandma's pain pills and smoking dope and drinking, and one day I've got a needle in my arm. This is because the brain adjusts over time to addictive inputs. Um, Part of sobriety, and one of the reasons it really takes about a year or a little longer usually for sobriety and recovery to set in, is because that's how long it takes the brain to readjust. Um, the pleasure center of the brain, the reward center of the brain needs to readjust and get us back to a baseline. And if you're hitting it with cigarettes or vaping, I'm sorry, vaping is smoking cigarettes without, I mean, it just is. It has all the same chemicals and neurochemicals. You're hitting that part of the brain with the sledgehammer with every hit, and the brain cannot heal. That's why we're a no smoking facility. The brain can't start to heal if you're still smoking or vaping. Um, and nicotine, by the way, it is a huge dopamine hit. That's why it's so hard to quit cigarettes. Please quit smoking. Bad for your lungs. Vaping is just as bad for you as cigarettes. Oh my God.
yeah, do the,
Yeah.
do the real research, not the ones by like
Yeah, yeah. Don't
like,
pretend that vaping is better for you or
no.
better for your lungs and your throat, your mouth. It isn't. It's the same. It's just a different delivery method for the same crap.
Well,
Sorry.
and I want
I'll
to
get
skip down to the
off the
bottom question too, because it's about cannabis. And so, like, this is all similar.
yeah.
Anything, just like you said, Scott, anything that I'm using to numb out and escape is a problem. So like for me, if I was using cannabis, like that's another substance. So I would not be in recovery, even if it's medical. I mean, everybody can get a prescription. I think this is my opinion. So again, take it, but everybody can get a medical marijuana, prescription. So it was like, is it helping my recovery? Like if I can go numb out on something, that is not helping my recovery. If I'm doing grounding exercises, breathing exercises, if I'm journaling, that is helping my recovery. If I am looking for something external to fix me, it's probably a problem. And that includes food. Like I'm, I have an eating disorder. Like, I've been in recovery for, decades, but it was like one of those things. If I'm going to the pantry, and occasionally I will find myself standing at the pantry and I go, oh, what's going on for me? Shut the pantry and, go do what I need to do to take care of me. So, okay, my son is coming out of inpatient for a few weeks next week. He is addicted to high dose THC vapes, daily use for months. He will come home. He is 17 years old. Texas is a felony adult charged to have a vape. How do we as parents walk the line of keeping him supported but not controlling him? He should be peeing clean for the next week or so. He will attend marijuana anon groups. School is still TBA, as he is where he gets his drugs, people, places, and things. He wants to have rights, privileges, but the line was terrible and there's almost no trust. Suggestions? He has a psychiatrist and therapist here in Texas to support him.
Hopefully the inpatient treatment center will help you with this. He should have an aftercare plan, and you should be in on the aftercare plan, and it should involve, what parental boundaries are going to be set, I don't know. I would be reaching out to the inpatient treatment facility. I mean, one of the things we do at Seeking Integrity, I guess I can only speak for us, is there's an aftercare plan. It's very detailed, and spouses, parents, whoever it is that needs to be involved, they're involved. They know what the boundaries are. They know what the rules are. And, yeah, I mean, he's a kid. He wants to be a kid still, but he's going to have to deal with his, unfortunately, at least he's getting in early to recovery. I mean, I wish I'd gotten in recovery at 17. Would have been, maybe I wouldn't have made many mistakes, but I feel for you. I feel your pain.
And I think, for you as parents, like I go to boundaries. What are the, like there needs to be the conversation of, like we're providing space for you in our home, and it's your home too. And, there are, like we are not going to get in trouble, with the law for your behavior. So like, here's how we expect you to behave. Here's how we will support your recovery. And here's what you need to do on your, on your own. And, and there's school, there's online schools. I mean, there's lots of options, and so finding out what's going to be helpful for him. Again, I agree with Scott. What is the treatment center providing for you, to help you as parents navigate this? And Scott mentioned before, prodependence. Read it, because you are not, you are not uh, responsible for him. He is a minor, but he's just under 18. So it's like one of those where he wants to be an adult. You got to make adult decisions and choices. And like Scott said, he wishes he'd gotten into recovery at 17. He was a little busy in active addiction at 17. Me too. And so so he has an opportunity. He has some education. I know lots of people, like there's young people's meetings and groups, and there are other people. So if he, 12 step with other young people would be good, because they're not looking at old people like me, to get help and support. But he needs a tribe of people. Real short, because we're almost out of time. I want to get to the last question too. But when I was doing my research for this, I pulled out, my big book, and I found buried in the, in the indexes, my treatment plan from when I was, in recovery. And I remember and I found the person's name. I actually looked her up, and she passed away a couple years. I put condolences, but I remember her more than 40 years later, and she said, if you don't make recovery fun, you won't make it. And I mean, I just got goosebumps. I remember that. And so I made a point of being social with other people, in recovery. I learned to do things. I wasn't just sitting home, feeling sorry for myself. So I would encourage, like, what is he looking to do for fun in recovery, that he wasn't doing when he was, in active addiction. So
Yeah, Tammy, I have to zip off. I have to
okay,
deal with this
so
issue.
turn it
So
over to me. I'm going to answer the one last question and then we're going to go. All right. So, okay. One issue I see with 12 steps is calling yourself an addict when you introduce yourself. It does not help my self-esteem. What 12 step has this tradition of shaming yourself? I'll tell you what, I'm going to tell you that for me, it was um a gift. Like, it isn't a shaming thing. It is like, I own that, because otherwise I was crazy. I mean, who would keep doing this stuff, with negative consequences? Why would I keep doing that? So I either was completely crazy, because I was go, oh, I'm not going to do this again today, and I did. So the label of addict to me was a gift. You don't have to. There's not a single meeting that I know of where you have to introduce yourself. You can say, I'm here, I'm exploring this, but for me, it was a gift that there's a reason why I was doing all this crazy stuff. And there's an opportunity to do things differently. They told me, if you do these things, you don't have to continue to have the negative consequences. You don't have to continue to have those behaviors. So, whether you introduce yourself with that label, I've been to lots of meetings where people go, I'm Tami and I'm here. I'm not sure, but I'm here. Or, yeah, I'm Tami. I've struggled with some compulsive behaviors and I'm here to learn. Okay. And you can share. So, but to automatically, it is the opposite of shaming. It is incredibly empowering to go, oh, wait, I can have a choice in this. I don't have to accept that, this is a horrible life sentence in a negative way. I have the ability to choose differently. So that's my thoughts on that. Everybody gets to choose. I hope some of this has been helpful for you. We posted links to things. Reach out if you have questions. We're happy to have you here. So, okay, I'm going to, I think I have to, he didn't make me host, so I apologize. I'm going to try to figure this out and see if I can, me more, reclaim host. I'm claiming host. Okay, now I can end it. Bye, everyone. Thank you.